I still remember the morning after my mother's funeral. The house was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, almost uncomfortable, as if even the walls were trying to adjust to her absence. The sunlight that usually slipped through the curtains felt dimmer that day, or maybe it was just my own heart, heavy and tired, trying to keep me standing. I had not slept much, even though the night had been long, filled with visitors, condolences, and the kind of tears that leave your eyes warm and swollen. You would think that after the funeral of a parent, the only thing left is grief. Grief is heavy but familiar. Grief is something the heart can eventually understand. What I did not expect was what came next, the slow unraveling of the family I thought I knew. People say funerals bring families together. In my case, the funeral only revealed the cracks that had been waiting beneath the surface. Cracks I had ignored, cracks I had explained away, cracks I was too hopeful to see clearly. When I woke up that morning, I believed my siblings and I would sit together, remember our mother, maybe drink the tea she used to prepare, and talk about the days when life felt simple. I imagined us sharing stories, laughing and crying in the same breath, reminding each other that family was all we had left. But life rarely matches the picture we paint in our minds. I walked into the living room and found my older brother Kamran sitting at the edge of the sofa, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. He did not look up when I entered. His posture felt tense, as if he had been waiting for something but did not know how to begin. My sister Farah was standing near the window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She looked like she had been awake for hours. There was a hardness in her eyes I had never seen before, a tightness around her mouth like she was holding something inside, waiting for the right moment to let it out. For a moment none of us spoke. The silence felt thick, like the air before a storm. I stood there, holding my breath without realizing it. Finally I said softly, "Did either of you sleep?" Farah shrugged. Cameron didn't answer. It was the kind of silence that tells you something is wrong long before words confirm it. I sat down slowly. My hands felt cold. I thought maybe they were still grieving, still lost in their own thoughts. But then Farah turned to me, and her voice, usually warm, came out flat. "We need to talk," she said. Those 4 words should be simple. But on that morning they felt like the beginning of something I was not prepared to face. Cameron finally lifted his eyes toward me. They were distant, controlled. He had always been the steady one, slow to anger, patient, the kind of brother who would rather swallow his discomfort than burden others. But that morning something in him had shifted. Farah walked toward the dining table and placed her hand on a brown envelope. I recognized it immediately. It was the one the lawyer had given me at the funeral, the envelope containing our mother's final wishes. I had not opened it yet. I did not have the strength, but it seemed my siblings had already decided we needed to face it now. "You should open it," Farah said quietly, but her quietness carried pressure. I hesitated. "Can we do this later, maybe after breakfast? Emotions are still—" Cameron interrupted, his tone sharp in a way I had never heard from him. "No, we should do it today." Something inside me tightened. My breath felt unstable, but I reached for the envelope anyway. The paper felt rough under my fingers. My hands trembled slightly as I broke the seal. Inside was a single letter, my mother's handwriting, soft, curved, familiar. Just seeing it made my eyes warm again. I swallowed and began to read silently at first, but Farah said, "Read it out loud." So I did. My mother's letter began the way she always spoke, gentle, thoughtful. She talked about her love for us, how proud she was of each of her children, how she wished for peace among us after her departure. Her words were full of warmth. But as I continued reading, I felt the tension around me grow tighter, like invisible ropes pulling at all of us. Then I reached the part none of us were ready for. She had written that she wanted the house, the home we grew up in, to be given to me. Not shared, not divided, given entirely to me. My voice cracked as I read the line. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. I looked up instinctively, and Farah's expression had darkened completely. Kamran looked away. The room seemed to shrink. Even the quiet felt heavier. I lowered the letter slowly. I didn't know," I whispered. My voice sounded small, helpless. "I didn't ask for this." Farah's laugh came out sharp, bitter. "Of course you didn't ask for it. You didn't have to." "Farah!" "No," she snapped, her voice breaking. "Do not pretend you didn't know she favored you. Do not stand there acting surprised." Her words pierced me deeper than I expected. Cameron stayed quiet, but the silence between us was no longer gentle, it was cold. "I'm not trying to take anything from either of you," I said, my hands trembling slightly. "We can discuss it. We can find a way that feels fair to all of us." But Farah shook her head. Fair? Fair would have been splitting everything like normal families do. Fair would have been our mother trusting all of us equally. Cameron finally spoke, his voice low. We just buried her yesterday, and already we are here. I nodded. I know, I didn't want this. None of us did. But the truth was already out. It lay between us like a shadow, the house, the inheritance, and the unspoken resentments that had probably been growing for years. That morning, I realized something painful. My mother's final act of love toward me was becoming the very thing tearing my family apart. As the hours passed, small conversations became arguments. Arguments became accusations. Old wounds resurfaced. Memories were twisted. And every word spoken felt like stepping deeper into a place none of us knew how to escape. By afternoon, the siblings I thought I knew began to change. Their voices, their expressions, even their silences felt different. And as the sun began to set that day, I understood something clearly. After the funeral, they were not just grieving, they were revealing themselves. And the people I thought I knew were showing me who they really were. Before everything changed, before the house became a symbol of division instead of comfort, my family was more than just a group of people sharing the same last name. Or at least I believed we were. Maybe that belief came from nostalgia, or maybe it came from the way my mother held us together like a thread that never seemed to break. My childhood was simple. We did not have much, but we had routines that made life feel warm. My mother would wake before sunrise, the smell of her tea filling the house before any of us were even awake. Cameron, being the eldest, always took his responsibilities seriously. He would help her in the mornings, carrying buckets of water or sweeping the front yard before school. Farah was quieter back then, soft-spoken, gentle, always holding onto my mother's arm when she walked. And me? I was the youngest, the one who followed everyone around, asking questions, trying to fit into spaces too big for me. My mother used to say, "You see the world differently. One day that will be your gift." I didn't understand what she meant until much later. Growing up, the three of us had different paths. Cameron became the practical one. He worked hard, kept his head down, and believed life was simple if you didn't ask too many questions. Farah grew stronger with age. She learned to protect herself early, especially after our father passed away. She became the one who handled the bills, the forms, the decisions. And I became the bridge, always trying to keep peace, always trying to soften corners between them. But being the bridge is a quiet burden. You don't realize how much weight you carry until the structure you are holding begins to crack. My mother was the real glue. Even when we argued, even when life pulled us in different directions, she kept us connected. Her house, our childhood home, was the center of everything. Every celebration, every holiday, every big moment began and ended in those walls. I suppose that is why she left the house to me. Not because she loved me more, but because I was the one who stayed. I was the one who visited her every weekend. I was the one who held her hand during her last months when her health started to fade, but Cameron and Farah never saw it that way. To them, love should not influence inheritance. To them, equality meant everything divided perfectly, no questions, no exceptions. Maybe they were right in their own way. Maybe grief makes people see fairness differently. The months leading up to the funeral were not easy. My mother's health had been declining slowly, like a candle losing its flame. Some days she was too tired to stand. Some days she didn't remember what she had eaten. Some days she looked out the window as if she were trying to memorize the world before leaving it behind. I spent those final months by her side. I cooked her meals. I read her favorite books aloud. I sat next to her, holding her hand even when she slept. She used to smile weakly and whisper, "You remind me of your father, quiet but strong." I don't know if I was strong. I only know that I didn't want her to feel alone. Cameron visited when he could, though work kept him busy. Farah visited too, but her visits grew shorter. Sometimes she looked uncomfortable seeing my mother so weak. Sometimes she would leave abruptly, wiping her eyes and saying she had errands to run. We all loved her, but we all loved differently. When my mother passed, it felt like someone had taken the ground from beneath my feet. Even though we knew it was coming, nothing prepares you for that final breath, that final silence. The funeral brought everyone together, but grief works strangely. Some people become softer, but intentions don't always translate into understanding. And love doesn't always translate into agreement. The morning after the funeral, when the letter revealed everything, it didn't matter what my mother had meant. It didn't matter that she wrote her wishes with trembling hands. It didn't matter that she wanted peace. All my siblings could see was the result, a decision they didn't understand, a decision that felt unfair to them. And in that misunderstanding, their grief started turning into something else, something colder, something I wasn't ready for. If I had known what was coming, maybe I would have handled things differently. Maybe I would have spoken sooner, or softened the moment, or tried to explain that I never asked for any of it. But life doesn't give us rehearsals, only moments. And the decisions we make in those moments shape everything that follows. In the days that followed the reading of the letter, the air inside the house felt different. The same rooms where we once celebrated birthdays and shared meals now held a quiet tension, as if the walls themselves were listening. Every conversation felt shorter. Every glance lingered too long. Even the sound of footsteps in the hallway carried a weight that made my chest feel tight. Grief was supposed to bring us closer. Instead, it seemed to pull us apart with every passing hour. Cameron began spending more time outside, pacing the garden or sitting on the old bench beneath the mango tree. He looked like a man carrying something too heavy to say out loud. When I approached him, he would nod politely, answer in short sentences, and look away. It wasn't anger. It was something much harder to face, disappointment. Farah, on the other hand, became sharper. Her movements were quick, her voice firm, and her eyes carried a quiet storm behind them. She cleaned the kitchen in silence, made tea without asking if we wanted any, and walked through the house as if she no longer belonged there but couldn't bring herself to leave. One evening, as the sky turned orange, I found her in our mother's room. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her fingers running over the patterns of the bedsheet. She looked smaller in that moment, almost fragile. I stood at the doorway, unsure whether to speak. She noticed me and sighed. "You didn't tell us," she said quietly. "There was nothing to tell," I replied softly. "I didn't know." Farah shook her head. "You must have known she trusted you more. You must have known she'd choose you." Her words hurt. Not because they were harsh, but because she truly believed them. I stepped closer and sat on the chair near the window. "Farah," I whispered, "trust doesn't mean she loved you less. She made a choice based on what she believed was best." She looked up at me, her eyes shining with restrained tears. "And what about what is fair? What about what we deserve?" I wanted to say that love is not something you divide like property, that time spent with a parent is not a competition, that grief should not be measured, but I knew none of that would help her in that moment. "I'm not keeping the house from you," I said gently. "We can decide together what to do. We can share it, rent it, sell it, whatever makes you both feel at peace." But Farah shook her head again. "It's not about the house, it's about being chosen, it's about being left out." There it was, the truth beneath everything. I didn't know how to respond. Sometimes silence is all you can offer. A few hours later, after Farah left the room, I found a small drawer open beside my mother's bed. Inside were old photographs, us as children, our father smiling, my mother standing in the garden holding a basket of flowers. There were letters, dried rose petals, and folded pieces of cloth my mother once embroidered. I held one of the photos between my fingers and felt a wave of sadness wash over me. How had we reached a point where memories felt like weapons instead of comfort? In the living room, the tension grew heavier. Small disagreements began to surface. Cameron questioned the timing of the letter. Farah questioned its authenticity. They both questioned the fairness of it all. One night, as we sat at the dining table, a place where we once shared stories and laughter, Cameron finally spoke what had been building inside him. "I just don't understand," he murmured, staring at his tea. "I have been the one supporting the family for years. I helped pay for repairs, bills, medicines, and still she left the house to you?" His tone wasn't angry, just wounded. "I know," I said softly. "You did so much, she appreciated every bit of it." "Then why not show it?" he asked, his voice trembling. I didn't have an answer. Sometimes love expresses itself in ways we cannot predict, ways that don't follow logic or fairness. Sometimes a mother simply sees the child who needs something more. Whether that child understands it or not, Farah joined in. "It feels like we were not enough for her, like we failed in some way." "No," I said firmly, "you didn't fail, none of us did." But my words felt small compared to the weight of their emotions. As the days passed, the house mirrored our hearts, messy, unsettled, scattered. Dishes left unwashed, curtains half drawn, lights left on in empty rooms. Even the air felt tired. Relatives came to check on us. They brought food, prayers, and comforting words. but beneath their visits I could sense curiosity. People always sense when something is wrong, even if they don't know the details. Some of them whispered to Farah in the kitchen. Some of them patted Kamran on the back as if consoling him for something more than grief. And some of them glanced at me with an expression I couldn't quite understand. Pity, maybe, or quiet judgment. One afternoon, the three of us sat in the living room again, the same place where the letter had first been opened, the same place where everything shifted. Farah folded her arms tightly. Kamran leaned against the couch. I stood near the window, watching the light fade as clouds gathered outside. "We need to make a decision," Farah said. "We can't drag this on." Kamran nodded. "I agree. This is our home too. We grew up here too." "I know," I said gently, "and I'm not trying to take that away." Farah looked at me sharply. "Then prove it." Those words sat heavy in the room. Prove it, as if love required evidence, as if grief needed justification. But I understood what she meant. They wanted assurance. They wanted to feel seen. They wanted to feel like they still mattered. The storm outside began rumbling softly, the sound echoing through the house. And in that moment I realized something that made my chest tighten. Grief doesn't only break hearts, it exposes them. My siblings were hurting not just because of the house, but because they felt replaced in our mother's final decision. They felt overlooked, and that pain had turned into a quiet resentment they didn't know how to express. The conflict was no longer about property, it was about identity, belonging, love, and the fear of losing all three at once. I didn't know how to fix it, but I knew things were only beginning to unravel. The night the turning point arrived, the rain fell harder than usual. It drummed against the windows in steady waves, filling the house with a sound that felt almost restless. The air smelled of wet earth, and the wind pushed gently against the wooden frames, making them creak as if the house itself was trying to speak. I was in the kitchen, making tea the way my mother used to, slowly, with intention. The warmth of the stove felt comforting against the cold evening. I hoped the tea might calm all of us, even a little. When I carried the tray into the living room, I saw Kamran and Farah already seated, waiting, though not for tea. Farah was holding a stack of papers. Kamran's jaw was tense, his fingers tapping the table as if preparing for something difficult. I placed the tray down carefully. "What's this?" I asked softly. Farah took a slow breath. "We went to see the lawyer today." The words hit me in a way I didn't expect. My heart sank, not out of fear, but out of the realization that they had gone without me. Without telling me, without discussing it. I sat down, my hands folded in my lap. "Why?" "You know why," Kamran said gently, though his voice was strained. "We can't keep living like this. We needed clarity." I nodded, though the quiet pain settled deep in my chest. "What did he say?" Farah hesitated, then held out the papers. "He said the will is valid, completely valid. No disputes, no loopholes, no misunderstandings." I swallowed slowly. I had expected this, yet hearing it aloud, hearing it from them, made everything feel sharper. Kamran exhaled heavily. Mother knew exactly what she was doing. There was no anger in his voice, just resignation, a quiet acceptance mixed with something else, hurt still raw and unhealed. I looked at the papers but didn't reach for them. "I never doubted her," I said softly. "I only hoped you wouldn't doubt me." Farah's eyes flickered with something fragile. "It's not about doubting you," she whispered. "It's about realizing she made a choice we didn't see coming." The room felt heavy with truths none of us had spoken before, truths we didn't know how to hold gently. Farah continued, "The lawyer said something else too." I lifted my eyes. "He said," she added a handwritten note 2 months before she passed, a note explaining why she left the house to you. My breath caught. My mother had written more than the letter we read together. "Where is it?" I asked quietly. Kamran reached into the envelope and handed me a folded sheet of paper. The ink was faint in some places, as if her hands had trembled while writing. I took a slow breath before opening it. Her handwriting greeted me like a familiar touch. "My dear children, if you are reading this, I am no longer with you, and I hope you are holding each other, not drifting apart." My throat tightened. "I want you to understand something with gentle hearts. I am giving the house to my youngest because he is the one who kept this home alive for me in the last years." My vision blurred for a moment. He did not ask for this. I chose it, not to divide you, but because every time he sat beside me, I remembered your father. I remembered the warmth of this house. I remembered laughter. I want him to keep that warmth alive. A tear slipped down my cheek. "Kamran, you have strength that holds families together." Farah, you have a heart that protects what matters, and my youngest, you have the soul of this home." The letter ended with her familiar signature, shaky yet full of love. I folded the paper slowly, feeling its weight as if it were her hand resting over mine. I wiped my tears quietly, not wanting to break whatever fragile balance was left between us. Farah spoke first. "I didn't know she felt this way." Her voice was small, almost childlike. Cameron nodded, eyes lowered. "Neither did I." I took a deep breath. She loved all of us. She just expressed it in her own way. Farah looked at me with eyes full of something soft and wounded. "Why didn't she tell us?" "Maybe she wanted to protect you," I said. "Maybe she didn't want you to worry about losing this house. Or maybe she hoped we would handle it gently when the time came." Cameron rubbed his hands together. "We didn't handle it gently." "No," I said honestly, "we didn't." For the first time in days, silence settled over us without tension. Not comfortable yet, but less sharp. Then Farah whispered something I will never forget. "I thought she loved you more." I shook my head. "She didn't. She just needed me more at the end, that's all." Farah nodded slowly, her lips trembling. "I didn't want the house," she said softly. "I just didn't want to feel left out." And there it was, the heart of everything. Cameron added quietly, "I felt the same." My chest tightened with both sadness and understanding. Grief is not logical. Love is not equal in the way we expect it to be. Every child receives something different from a parent. Not more, not less, just different. The storm outside grew louder, the thunder rumbling in the distance. The lights flickered once, briefly, reminding us of how fragile everything was. Life, relationships, even the moments we often take for granted. I leaned forward, speaking with a steady voice. "We can heal this, but not if we stay wounded in separate corners. We need to talk, not about the house, but about us." Farah wiped her eyes. "About the years we drifted apart." Cameron nodded. "About the things we never said." The turning point was not a dramatic explosion. It was not shouting. It was not anger. It was the quiet realization that beneath the conflict, beneath the pain, beneath the misunderstandings, we were simply three children missing their mother in different ways, and for the first time since the funeral, we began to truly see each other. The days after that conversation felt different. The air inside the house was still heavy with loss, but the sharpness between us had softened. We were still hurting, still confused, still walking through our grief like people learning to stand again, but something had shifted. We were no longer standing on opposite sides of an argument. We were simply three siblings trying to understand how to move forward. The next morning, I woke up early and walked through the house in silence. The floorboards creaked under my feet, the way they always had when I was a child sneaking into the kitchen for late-night snacks. I could almost hear my mother's voice in the distance, humming softly as she stirred a pot or folded clothes. In the living room, the envelope from the lawyer still lay on the table. I picked it up and held it for a moment, then placed it gently in a drawer. The house was not just a document. It was not just a name on a paper. It was years of laughter, arguments, celebrations, and quiet nights. It was a part of us. Later that day, Cameron and Farah joined me in the kitchen. There was no announcement, no formal invitation, just three people drawn to the same familiar space. I poured tea for each of us the way my mother always did, small glasses, light sweetness, warm hands around warm cups. For a while we drank in silence. Then Cameron spoke. "I have been thinking," he said slowly, "about the house, about everything." Farah watched him quietly, so did I. He sighed. "The will is clear, the house belongs to you. Legally there is nothing to question, but this house, it is also a part of us. I don't want to fight you. I don't want lawyers or courts or bitterness, but I also don't want to walk away feeling like I lost something more than bricks and walls." His words were honest and they reached me deeply. I nodded. "I understand. I don't want you to walk away feeling that either." Farah set her cup down gently. "I don't care about ownership," she said. "I care about having a place where I still feel connected to them, to both of them, to Mama and Baba, a place where I'm not a guest." Her voice trembled on that last word, not a guest. I knew what she meant. She didn't want to knock on a door that used to be hers. I took a slow breath. "Then let's not treat it like mine," I said. "Let's treat it like ours, even if the paper says something different." They both looked at me, listening. "I will respect what our mother wrote," I continued. "This house is my responsibility. I will maintain it. I will pay for repairs. I will live here. But it will always be your home too. You will never need permission to come here. You will never be visitors. We can decide together how this house is used when we gather here, how we remember her." Farah's eyes softened. "You mean that?" "I do," I said, "from my heart." Cameron nodded thoughtfully. "What about the value?" he asked. "We are not rich. This house is worth something. It could help our children, our futures." He wasn't being greedy, he was being practical. He had a family to support, responsibilities he could not ignore. I looked down at my hands. I had already thought about this in the quiet of the night. "I have some savings," I said, "not much, but enough to slowly give each of you a share, not as a sale, not as a transaction, but as a way of saying, I know this house is part of your life too. I cannot split the walls, but I can share the blessing." Farah immediately shook her head. "I don't want your money." "I know," I replied gently, "but this isn't about money. It's about treating you fairly in the only way I can. Our mother chose me to hold the house, but I can choose to honor both of you within that choice." Cameron looked at me for a long time as if weighing my words. "You don't have to do that," he said quietly. "I know I don't," I answered, "but I want to." Silence filled the room again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful. "I also want this house to stay open," I added. "On her birthday, on the anniversary of her passing, on important days, we should meet here. No matter how busy life becomes, this will be the place we return to, not because of ownership, but because of her." Farah's eyes glistened with tears. "I would like that," she whispered. Cameron nodded. "So would I." Slowly we started discussing practical things, not in anger but with calm intention, how often Cameron's children could visit during school holidays, where Farah might stay if she needed a few days of quiet away from the noise of her life, how we might set up one room as a kind of family room, filled with photographs and memories, instead of things that could be divided or claimed. At one point, Farah smiled softly. It was small, but it was real. "I was scared," she admitted. "I was scared you would push us out." I shook my head. "I could never push you out of a place where you taught me how to ride a bicycle in the yard and where Cameron used to help me with my homework at this very table." Cameron smiled faintly. "You were terrible at math." I laughed. "I still am." For a brief moment, we were not talking about wills or property or fairness. We were just siblings again. Later that afternoon, we went through our mother's belongings together, not as enemies dividing, but as children remembering. We opened drawers, lifted folded clothes, smelled the faint traces of her perfume that still lingered on some fabrics. We found old recipes she had written, little notes reminding herself to call someone, a list of things she wanted to cook for the next Eid. Cameron found our father's watch and held it carefully. "I think I should keep this," he said, "not because I am the eldest, but because I always looked up to him." I nodded. "You should." Farah found a set of bangles our mother used to wear on special occasions. She held them to her chest and closed her eyes for a moment. "These feel like her laughter," she said softly. "Then keep them," I told her. As for me, I kept a simple shawl. It wasn't expensive, it wasn't special in the eyes of the world, but she used to wear it almost every evening. It carried her warmth, her scent, her presence. We cried. We laughed, we told stories, some we heard before, some we had forgotten, some we had never shared. It did not erase the pain of those first difficult days after the funeral. It did not magically heal every wound, but it began something important, a slow stitching of the heart. That evening, as the sun set and the house grew quiet, Cameron stood up to leave. He paused at the door and turned back to me. "You will be okay here alone?" I smiled gently. "I won't be alone, not really." He nodded, understanding. He hugged me tighter than he had in years. Farah followed him to the door, then turned back once more. "If you ever feel the house is too heavy to carry," she said softly, "call me. I will come." "I know," I said, and I meant it. When they left, I walked through the house one more time. The furniture was the same, the walls were the same, the silence was still there. But something had changed. The house no longer felt like a point of conflict. It felt like what it had always been, a home that belonged to all of us in different ways. In the weeks that followed, the house slowly returned to a quieter rhythm. Not empty, not lonely, just quieter. The way a home sounds when life is rearranging itself after loss. Some mornings I would wake up to the soft golden light slipping through the curtains, and for a few seconds, I would forget she was gone. My heart would expect to hear her voice calling from the kitchen, or the gentle shuffle of her feet along the hallway, but memory is a tender visitor. It comes softly, and it leaves softly, reminding us of what was without letting us hold on to it too tightly. I spent the first few weeks fixing small things around the house, tightening loose screws, clearing old papers, adding fresh flowers to the vase on the dining table, not because the house needed repair, but because I needed something to keep my hands busy. Grief often sits in the quiet spaces. It waits for the moments when our minds pause, then steps forward gently. During this time, Cameron and Farah visited often. Not every day, not with the nervous stiffness of those earlier days, but with a natural rhythm. Sometimes Cameron would bring fruit for the house. Sometimes Farah would sit with me in the living room, reorganizing shelves or talking about our childhood. The conversations were slow, honest, sometimes heavy, sometimes warm. One afternoon, as Farah and I sat together folding my mother's remaining clothes to donate, she paused and said something that stayed with me. "You know," she murmured, her fingers brushing over a faded blue scarf, "I was angry because I thought losing the house meant losing my place in this family, but now I realize it wasn't the house I was trying to hold on to, it was her." I looked at her quietly. "We all were," she nodded, "and maybe this is how she wanted us to learn that home is not a building, home is what we are to each other." Her words settled into my heart like a soft truth. Cameron had his own moment of reflection a few days later. He stayed late one evening helping me sort through some documents in the living room. The air was cool and the ceiling fan hummed gently above us. After a long silence, he said, "I used to think responsibility meant providing for everyone, making decisions, being the strong one. But maybe responsibility also means trusting others, trusting that we can share the burden." I smiled at him. "We can, and we should." He nodded, a soft, tired smile forming on his face. "I wish we had seen all this earlier." "Sometimes," I replied, "we only see clearly after something breaks." He didn't argue with that. He simply placed a hand on my shoulder and gave it a gentle squeeze, the kind he used to give when we were younger, in the evenings. When the house grew quiet again, I would sit on the veranda with a cup of tea. The sky would shift from blue to orange to a deep, comforting indigo. Sometimes I would close my eyes and imagine my mother sitting beside me, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her hands resting on her lap. "What would you say now?" I would wonder. "What would you want me to remember?" And every time the answer felt the same: love gently, forgive quickly, hold each other while you can. The turning point in our family did not arrive through grand gestures. It arrived through understanding, soft, imperfect, slow understanding. It arrived through the willingness to see each other not as competitors for affection, but as people shaped by the same love, the same memories, the same grief. We learned that inheritance is not just about property. Sometimes the real inheritance is the way we choose to carry our relationships forward, with warmth, with grace, with patience. One evening, weeks later, Farah stood in the doorway before leaving and said, "This house feels different now." "How?" I asked. She smiled softly. "It feels lighter, like it's breathing again." I glanced around the living room, the familiar furniture, the soft glow of the lamps, the photographs on the wall.